What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Mentor Me podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Hall, and today I had the opportunity to sit down with Paul Angone, who is an author and speaker, mainly towards questions that you have in your 20s and 30s. When you're young, you're kind of figuring out your career. You've probably moved like 3 or 4 times. You don't know what your dream job is, and you just have a lot of questions. So I had the opportunity to sit down with him and ask him about his journey and also just learn more about the questions we should be asking in our 20s. So I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's been different for every book. So like the first book, I mean, it's a wild story. So the first book that I started writing for years and years and got rejected by every publisher around is not the first book that got published. So I worked on that book off and on for like 9 years.
Wow.
But then I had one blog article take off called 21 Secrets to Your 20s. And that's, it's a long story. That was 10 years in and trying to start a website and all this stuff. But 21 Secrets to Your 20s took off. And then I connected with a publisher and they're like, hey, I gave them my book I'd been working on. And they're like, no, we don't like that. That's too raw. It's not a good fit for us. Can you think of something else? So I'm like, well, how about we turn the blog article into a book? We'll make it 101 Secrets to Your 20s because it's building kind of its own brand, its own momentum. And they're like, great, I love that. Can you get it to us in a month? And I'm like, sure, I can write that book in a month, no problem.
No way.
And I was working full time in marketing. I had 2 kids, a wife. So it was basically my family left for a month. And I just worked and then wrote the book every second I could. So that's kind of a long answer to say that book, I had a month deadline, but I also had all the blogs I'd written, a bunch of stuff that became part of the book.
Sure.
So like half of it was stuff I'd been writing again over years and years. And then the other half was stuff I just wrote in that month.
Got it. That makes sense.
So anyway, but the normal thing is maybe about a year and a half.
Okay.
For me, kind of off and on, going back and forth, working on a book. It just kind of depends.
What originally sparked your interest? It sounds like, you had this interest of writing books. What originally sparked your interest? Did you know you wanted to do that at some point?
No, I had no idea. I had no clue. It was really birthed out of me being in a hotel room, traveling for a job.
Yeah.
Asking these questions of what do I do with my life? This is not how I envisioned it. This is not how I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And literally just opening up my laptop and being like, it was almost like therapeutic. It was almost like me just having to put these thoughts and put words down, like define what I was thinking and going through, just these feelings of frustration. So that's where it started. And then as it grew and grew and I started talking to more and more friends, and being kind of the friend that would be like, you know what, I'm struggling. And are you guys struggling? Like this doesn't, who knows the answers? And, or this friend's moving back in with their parents and they're depressed. This parent, friend is really struggling with depression and going from there, just feeling like, wow, there's something here. This is what I'm writing about. This is what I'm feeling. I think I'm tapping into something.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of birthed out of this organic state of this is really important to me. And I feel like, and then I was looking for those books, like, well, who's writing? I need help. It was more like I need help.
Yeah.
I couldn't really find books that identified with the struggle that I was feeling.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I should be the one that writes it,
Sure.
But then it was trying to convince publishers along the way that was a good idea, which they didn't think was a good idea for a while.
Yeah. Which is crazy now because, you look on the shelves and you're right. There aren't a lot of books of helping 20-year-olds. When I came across your books, I could think of Meg J's book and your books. And that's kind of all I can think of.
Yeah.
So,
there's becoming more and more, like we've proven kind of that there's a market in a way.
Yeah.
That there's a need. But it took a long time to do that. But yeah, that's how it started. I never had this dream of, I'm going to be an author. I could write a book. I never even thought that I could have that capability.
Sure.
So it's still wild to me that I have four books now. I mean, it just seems strange.
Yeah. I have a question. Like, so you talked about your friends and they were kind of all going through the same thing. I don't know when you met your wife, but have you pulled from your wife and your friends a lot of, not a lot of, some of the content in your books and questions in your books? Have you engaged them to see what questions they have, or how have you gone about, has it all been your questions?
Yeah, so I've been doing, like I said, I've been doing this for over a decade now.
Yeah.
So through my website, so I started my website out of my master's program, and I was doing a lot of research and studying about emerging adulthood and what is this generation going through and how is it different and how is it the same as previous generation. So I was doing kind of research through the master's program, but then once the website got launched and stuff started taking off, a lot of the research was people emailing me. I mean, there was a time where there's so many 20-somethings were coming out and emailing me and saying, hey, I just read your article. Thank you. I felt like I was the only one. I felt like I was the only one struggling. I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. So then that started becoming this process, almost a research process, but mainly it was just trying to help people and answering their questions and hearing what they were going through. So so some of it is my own friends and personal conversations, and definitely my wife has been a huge part of the whole journey. I mean, she edits everything I write before any publisher sees it. It's me and her hashing it out and going back and forth and editing it. So she's edited every book. But yeah, so it's been a mixture. It's been a mixture of people coming through my website, through social media, and then also friends and my wife. And trying to get to the heart of what is truly important, what matters, what are the questions we need to be asking, what are the lies that I feel like are the biggest stumbling blocks that this generation is believing.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. Yeah, and I think you hit something on the head too, where everyone's scared to admit they have questions in their 20s. They're kind of taught in school just to like roll with it, fight through it, work your tail off. Even if you hate your life, like just keep working. And so I think you opened up this unexposed area where people can now say, oh, you have that too? Like I feel that way. And like it's freed people up to just be like, okay, other people have this question. I'm not alone. That's the important thing. They're not alone.
It's exactly this. And what's been wild, and I've been talking to people about this recently, is even seeing that go to different countries. So seeing my books translated into Russia and Thailand and India and these places, and especially Iran, which has been the wildest story of all because they were bootlegged copies. I'm not making any of them or anything. But that's how it kind of has to work, because U.S. sanctioned deal from the U.S. to Iran for copyright issues and stuff. So my books go to Iran, and now, I mean, probably my most passionate fans who I love interacting with the most are all from Iran. And so now you have a 23-year-old in Iran, a female, who's emailing me that they are, finding hope and finding truth, finding encouragement through this book, through my book, 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s, or 101 Secrets for Your 20s. So that's mind-blowing to me, right? That I could write something that I have no experience living in these countries, but I'm touching on something that we're all going through. We're all searching for purpose. We're all searching for hope. We're all searching for meaning. We all have doubts, insecurities, fears.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It's kind of opening up that permission to say, hey, we're all in this together, even across borders, across oceans. Like there's no culture, there's no ethnicity, there's nothing that says like, this is who should be wrestling with this. It's humanity, right?
Right.
But to have that connection to say, hey, and that's how we connect. I've said it before, but we don't connect over our pretend perfection. We connect over our shared struggle. Of that.
That's good.
And that's why even you saw the Me Too movement take hold, and because that was a powerful phrase. It was Me Too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you too. Oh, me too. And there is so much life and freedom to that.
For sure.
Instead of the email that I get the most is, I feel so alone, which that to me is insane, that we could have a globally connected, instantly connected generation all over the world, and yet we all still feel so alone.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's a problem. Like, what's going on there? that we can talk with anybody. We can talk with our childhood best friend through whatever app we choose right away, and yet we're not really talking. And it's almost like we're hiding in plain sight through social media. We're not really we're being seen, but we're not really being known.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem.
Yeah. I'm sure through COVID, you've gotten a lot of like questions and just people being lonely because that connection has even dwindled further.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been seeing it even firsthand, not me personally, but people that I know who are living alone right now. And once things got shut down, they, you know, it's half COVID, it's half them not taking initiative too, and finding a community. But, you know, they have now become super lonely and kind of, they were super involved at some point in community, and just once this happened, kind of abandoned it. And now it's just sad. You know, you want to see that come back for people, and you want to see them thrive in a community and feel welcome in a community. So that's that's what I'm like on the lookout for extra heavily. In the it's been going on for a year, but especially in the past month, I've been seeing it around me and hearing about it around me. And so it's like, I'm sure you're getting, you know, swarmed with emails like that.
Yeah, you know, and I'm almost hoping that that is a benefit that we see come out of this. It was, you know, we're all addicted to technology, and I talk about it in my new book, my 25 Lies book. I call it obsessive connection disorder. How we are obsessed with connecting all the time. We have to be on our phone, and we're all addicted. I mean, pretty much all of us are addicted to our phone, addicted to social media. We're spending way too much time on all this stuff. So it's almost like, here's your addiction, and that's all you get. Like, here's technology, and that's all you get. You can't see people. You can't go to coffee. I'm going to give you, it's like God saying, here, I'm going to give you guys all what you've been addicted to for so long. Yeah. And so I'm hoping the benefit is like what you were saying, we're going to see the swing of people that are so sick of that being their own connecting point, that they're going to be like, coffee face to face where I can look at somebody, like that's going to be this radical thing that I want to do in a men's group. Yeah. And I talk about that in my book, the new book too, of sitting in a circle with men every Wednesday morning, and we all talk about what we're going through and our struggles and our doubts, and maybe we're reading something together, and it's just a real honest time. Like, there's a lot of trust there. Yep. And to know and to be known, it changes my whole week. You know, it makes me feel like I'm not the only one going through things. I'm not alone. I have a place to share things. I can get wisdom from other people. And again, I think we've lost that really as a culture, to know and to be known, because we are behind so many screens. We're behind so many filters. We're behind so many amazing updates about, you know, LOL, my life is so great, that we're all faking all the time, you know? And so I think I'm hoping that becomes a benefit, what you described basically. For sure. Yeah. I was actually going to ask you about social media and your view on it. And, because I'm sure 20 somethings, like the comparison game, seeing people at this level of a job, or traveling here, traveling there, having kids, having a family, you know, all those things probably take a toll on you, whether you recognize it at that time or not. Because when I'm like going through social media, I always say to myself, well, I'm not really comparing, but I am. I'm just not like recognizing it in that moment. You know, I typically, I asked this question in my new book, like, how many of us go on social media for 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever, how much time, how many of us leave that experience and are thinking to ourselves, I feel so much better about my life. Like, I feel great. Like, I'm ready to go. I feel energetic. I have all these ideas. I'm ready to work out. I'm like, I don't think many of us leave that experience and feel that way. I think it's the opposite, right? Where it's like, oh man, they got that promotion, and look at me, I'm struggling. Or they got married, and I'm struggling because I'm not getting married. Or they finally had a kid, I can't have kids. Yeah. You know, and all those feelings. You know, I describe it. I put it in this metaphor too. Of, you used to have to go to your 10-year reunion, right? High school, college, to look everybody up and down, to see who's doing better than whom, right? Just fake it for one night. Like, rent the BMW, lose some weight, get a toothpaste, whatever it took. You just had to fake it for one night to prove to everybody that you're somebody. And then you could go back to your real life after that night. And now we're trying to pull off that same phenomenon every day with every post. And it is exhausting. And it's just sucking, I think, our soul out to constantly feel like we're having to put up this. It's like we're all stars in our own reality show, right? And we're all trying to put up a facade of whatever the reality show that we're trying to portray. And then it's like it's like a movie star coming back and saying, well, if only they could see my real life. Yeah. If they only could see me off stage, you know? And I think that's a huge problem. And I think that is affecting us in a huge way.
For sure. That's so interesting. I've never heard it put that way. But I agree with you. Instead of pretending for one night, you're pretending for unlimited amount of time. You have to keep that up. And it's impossible to keep that up and not be your true self and feel connected to people, because you're not being yourself. You're not being vulnerable. You're lying about maybe the work stress you have or the health issues around you and things like that. So it's like you put up this facade and that's a tricky thing. Well, I'm curious to hear about, you know, the start of your career and how you found your path to what you're doing now. So tell me a little bit about a younger you, as you had come out of college, and it sounds like you got your master's and kind of plugged right into what you're doing now. How did you find that? How did you find out you wanted to do this?
Well, first of all, that definitely, what you described was definitely not the case. I mean, I felt like a failure. I mean, I crashed and burned after college just because I felt like I felt like I was failing, and everybody again was more successful than me. So it was a windy road of picking up odd jobs. You know, I worked at a call center in LA with people yelling at me 8 hours a day with all their problems. I interviewed to teach Korean students how to take the SAT in LA, and I didn't know Korean, and I was terrible at the SAT, but it was just like I had to try to find a job somewhere, you know. It was a real windy path, and it was a struggle. I mean, it was a real struggle, but that's where that passion came out of writing about it and talking about it and feeling like, man, there's something here, because this is so incredibly hard. And like, who has the answers? Who can, you know, I talk about feeling like I was, if you remember the child book, Are You My Mother? It was this little bird who's walking around because he's fallen out of his nest, and he's asking everybody, are you the dog and the cow and the chicken, are you my mother? Are you my mother? I remember feeling like I was that bird, but I was walking around to asking everybody, like, are you my life? Like, is this my life? Is this my home? Like, is this the place that's going to feel normal again? Like, somebody must know. And then I started feeling like I'm not even the bird. I'm just the egg. Like, I'm still the egg. And I feel like I'm ready to crack at any second. So even on my website right now and throughout this whole journey for me, I've always used eggs. Like, I have stop motion videos with eggs. I have pictures with these eggs with faces on them, just because that was my metaphor of how I felt for many years. Like, I just felt as fragile as an egg. So I say all that to put it in context. Like, that was my motivation and passion, was through my personal pain and problems that I was going through. And I think that becomes the powerful place for many of us when we tap into some of that. Instead of running away from our problems or pain, instead of medicating ourselves from our problems and pain, it's kind of facing it head on and saying, what do I do with this? How do I heal from this? But also, maybe how do I help other people through this? And I think that's where that's people that make the biggest impact, the biggest game changers, life changers, are usually people that have tapped into something that is so deeply personal to them, and they want to help other people because they know what it's like to go through that.
Yeah, I agree. I recently just heard someone say, you know, when you're in your darkest moments is actually when you should be like writing the most, like writing down how you feel, what's going on, because it kind of helps you recognize the frustration you feel. And so was the frustration you were feeling, was it, yeah, I have this degree, but what the heck am I supposed to do? Like, am I supposed to go and find a job that I'm going to hate? Or it sounds like I think a lot of times you come out of college and your two options are pursue what I love and make zero money,
Yeah.
or go do something I don't enjoy and make good money. Is that what you
Yeah.
were feeling? Were you at that crossroads a little bit?
Yeah, I was definitely. I think you described it well. Just, I want to make an impact. I want to make a difference. I want my life to mean something to somebody. But yeah, I'd like to make a living. I'd like to get married, and not have my wife be my sugar mama, which she was the first year of my marriage. Don't get me wrong. I was a struggling unemployed author, and she was a financial advisor. Which is not how I pictured getting married, and it wasn't how she was picturing getting married either. But that was the reality. It was all those questions. It was just trying to find that place again that feels like home, and it feels like you're just like a transient decade of your life where you're just moving around so much, moving to different jobs, moving different places, different friendships, and just trying to feel like a place that feels like a good fit. Yeah. And I think that's where those questions, that angst, that frustration, and then, how do you find your passion? Because we would talk about it all the time, like find your passion, find your purpose. But that's when I started talking, realizing it's like, it's through your problems. It's through your failure. Like if you fail miserably at something and then the next day you want to try it again, well, you're passionate about something, like you just found it, when instead I think we look at it the other way. It's like, well, if you found great success, if everybody's applauding you, well, then you found your passion. It's like, no, you just found like you could be a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
Because you found success, but then you crash and burn because you actually had no foundation to hold any of it.
Yeah. So today, fast forward to today, now you're speaking in front of large audiences. You have 4 books now, all based on helping 20s and 30-year-olds kind of answer questions about their life and just kind of help them get on the path that they're looking for. And you also help different generations communicate and work together, because there's that cultural difference. There's even the difference in language, between different generations. So how did you recognize that gap between the generations, and how did you add that together with what you originally found out, which was helping younger, people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's even a good example of like, you start pursuing something that you think is important and you don't know like what's around the bend. You don't know what's step 3. Like you're just taking step 1 and you're taking step 2, but you're doing it as best you can because it's really meaningful to you. And then, all of a sudden things happen, these opportunities come, these people come, things that you could have never imagined. And that's kind of been my case. I didn't set out strategically to like leverage my research and writing I was doing because I wanted to help hurting and broken 20-somethings into like, oh, well, that'll naturally lead me to be also a corporate speaker, speaking to leaders from across the world. I'm not that strategic of a businessman or anything to figure something like that out, but it was just that natural progression of again, these puzzle pieces, like getting a master's in organizational leadership, which I wasn't even sure at the time, why am I doing this? It just felt like the step I should take. And then as I'm writing and doing research, all of a sudden somebody from Goldman Sachs reaches out to me from HR, and they're like, hey, can you come speak to our young associates or young people that are, because they're leaving, we can't retain them. Yeah. And you seem to understand them. And I'm like, at first I thought, is like, is this a joke? Like, is this spam? Did somebody get a Goldman Sachs? Like, why is Goldman Sachs reaching out to me? It was because one of the HR people had read my book, 101 Secrets to Your 20s. And they just felt like, man, this guy really gets them. Yeah. So then it's progressed from in that. And then, I started doing a lot more research and studying how do we kind of being that middleman of sorts. How do I bring generations together? Because I feel I hear the leaders and what they're frustrated with, especially with all the stereotypes about millennials.
Oh, yeah.
And then I hear millennials and Gen Z too now of all their things they're struggling with leaders and leadership dynamics. And I don't feel like this is home for me. I feel like I'm an outcast in a way. So trying to bring that group together and move away from the stereotypes, which is so funny to me in a way that in our culture, especially now, like we're very careful to stereotype or generalize based on anything, right? Like you can get in big trouble if you're going to throw out a stereotype. Yet, if you throw out a stereotype about a millennial or now a Gen Z, like you got a front page article on Times, like everybody's going to be interviewing you because you researched like 100 millennials and now you're saying, here's who they are. Here's who these 90 million people are. I figured out. Like they're this box of cereal that you can just read the label and say, oh yeah, that's who they are. So I try to break that down and let's get to a common place when I'm doing those talks too.
Yeah. What do you see? You mentioned going to speak to Goldman Sachs. What do you recognize that companies are most frustrated with millennials? Where's the gap? What do they not understand about millennials? Where's that gap and what are they missing?
Yeah, one thing I do, I kind of trick my audience, which is a really helpful exercise, especially when I'm in a room full of Gen X and boomers, and they're usually pretty frustrated with millennials and Gen Z in a way.
Yeah.
But I'll throw up on my screen, I'll put entitled, narcissistic, self-absorbed, think they know and can do anything. I put that on a board and I say, okay, break up into a small group, and I want you guys to talk through your experience with millennials and these terms, right? Because this is what we hear all the time. And so the room gets real loud. Like people get real fired up. They're talking with their hands. Like it's like I'm a middle school teacher trying to like rein the class back in, you know, like it's hard.
Yeah.
But I bring them back in after they go off, you know, they're going off. And then I say, you know, actually I tricked you guys. And I press a button and then on my screen, all those words stay there, entitled, narcissistic, self-absorbed. But it switches from millennials to a 1970s essay called The Me Decade, and it's written about boomers when they were in their 20s.
Really?
And that's a real good moment because all of a sudden it just flips the script and it kind of puts people back in the place of, oh yeah, I kind of was arrogant at 22. I thought I had it all figured out at 25, or I was very entitled. I wouldn't listen to my parents at 23 and their advice, you know?
Yeah.
And so I do think through bringing those kind of experiences, we realize, yes, there are generational differences. We've all grown up in a different point in history, but there is a lot of similarities between generations with being young and confused and having those moments where you thought you had it all figured out and then you realize you don't.
Yeah.
And that becomes a relatable moment to where we can all talk about that together.
Yeah, I agree with that. You come out of college and everyone has these high dreams of what they're going to achieve, and they don't want anyone to tell them they're wrong or it might be different than what you picture. And so you come in and you kind of are this, you know, cocky, maybe a little bit, ignorant of what's going on around you, and probably not the best listener, to be honest.
Which was totally me. I mean, then that's why I can relate to that, and that's why I crashed so hard, because those lofty expectations or dreams or those ideals of who I was, when it crashed hard.
Yeah.
And I had that humbling experience for years of, wow, I don't even know what I don't know at this point. And that's it's a scary place. It's a humbling place. And it's those crossroad moments in life, right? Where we then figure out, okay, where am I going to go with this? Which way?
Yeah.
That's why I'm so passionate about this decade, because I feel like it's that crossroad moment in many of our lives.
Yeah.
So instead of waiting till I'm 60 and retired, and then I'll ask myself questions about, hey, what did I really want to do with my life? I get excited when this generation is asking themselves hard questions at 25.
Yeah.
Like I think we all should be asking ourselves hard questions at no matter the age. So I think it's a good thing, but then it's figuring out, what do I do with that once I start asking myself a question?
Right. I agree with that. Yeah. I think millennials are asking good questions, and just like any generation, I think you have good millennials, bad millennials, average millennials who some just don't want to work. They'll use the excuse of, it's just not what I want to do, but they don't really, they might not be fired up about anything. Whereas on the other end, and this is every generation, you probably have good boomers, bad boomers, that I'm talking about work specifically.
Yeah.
But when it does come to millennials, it seems like they want to be very purpose driven in the work that they do. They want to know what they're doing is making a difference. And is that what you saw when, there was that gap between millennials wanted to see better leadership? Is that what they were looking for? Were they looking for a leader to give that person purpose in what they're doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of boil it down to, and again, it's hard to boil it down too much because you're going to overstate things.
Yeah.
But when I get down to the heart of it, what I feel like millennials, especially and Gen Z too, are driven in a way by a fear of insignificance. So not even maybe even a yearning for significance, but even more driven by the fear of being insignificant, of doing work that's insignificant.
Yeah.
And so I think that plays out in many ways. So when I'm talking to leaders, I'm saying, well, you can bring significance in lots of different ways. And some of that could be through the relationships in the workplace. So that's been a change in leadership dynamics where a millennial or younger employee, they want to know their boss. They want to be able to ask their boss questions. They want to be able to talk. Or maybe an older generation, they just might want to say, just do your job and let's go home. Like, don't talk to me about your life. I don't care. Stuff like that. So, or it could be significance in the sense of, I want to do work that matters. I want it to matter that I want my work to matter. And so that's where that fear of insignificance comes. And then again, when you tie in social media, where again, we're all trying to look like our life is significant, like we're doing significant things, we're living this kind of significant life.
Yeah.
I think that plays into that lens too of then what success looks like. So it is a redefinition of sorts of what success might be, where maybe one generation, it wasn't as much about a fear of insignificance. It was just the Great Depression era, it was a fear of feeding my family. Like
exactly.
I want, and there was a lot to that. And they worked really hard. Saved everything, because of that feeling of I want to feed my family. So we see that ebb and flow between generations, but I think at the heart, we really do want that significance, and we're afraid that we're not going to achieve it.
Yeah. And the way I look at it too is, with, the great people that went through the Great Depression and kind of as we evolved throughout that, it is cool to see the evolution towards, I have to do this to make money for my family because things are really tough right now. It is cool to see that kind of evolve now to, I want to find something I love to do and be home with my family. You kind of still see that mix where millennials still want to make money. They still want to be home with their families, but they also want to do something that they love. So I almost look at it as those people and the boomers have now paved the way for millennials to do that. And I think that that's something millennials should just kind of look back and be thankful about too, and realize that it was kind of paved for them to be able to do this. We saw those generations.
And if we can marry some of these traits together, like, I think it's great for our generation to have big dreams and goals. Like, I think that's important to have hope and to be able to have this vision of this is what I want to do with my life, but then also have the big dreams, but then also be very perseverant and very faithful in the small, and to not despise the small beginnings, because that's how it's going to look. And it's not going to be anything that people care about. I wrote a lot of blogs and a lot of pages at 6 a.m. or late at night or whatever that nobody cared about. Like maybe my mom was reading and that was it. And I'd be like, Mom, please don't leave comments like on the article. It's just embarrassing for you to be the only one, right? But to marry the work ethic in a way. I wrote about this in my 101 questions you need to ask in your 20s book. I wrote about the story of when I went out on this crazy hunt to find my grandpa's old pickup truck, this 75 F-150 pickup truck that we used to go fishing in. So I had all these memories of this pickup truck. But once he passed away, it was kind of a mystery. Where did this truck go? Like it was kind of lost. So I went on this journey to go find the truck, and I found it in the back of a barn in my great uncle's farm that I grew up going to as a kid in Kansas. And it was in the back through my cousins. My cousins helped me found the back of the truck in this barn. But I remembered walking around with my cousins, and we were at my great uncle Russell's farm. And I loved my great uncle Russell. I loved going out there and visiting him, going fishing and seeing all the cows. It was like a totally different experience. But as I was walking around with my cousins, and they were sharing all these stories with me of, oh yeah, that barn, that got ripped down by a tornado, and then he rebuilt that. And then 5 years later, another tornado came and ripped it down again. And then he rebuilt it again. And then all these fences and all these fields and all these cows. And I just started understanding like I think sometimes our generation can get stuck in this feeling of, oh, I want to do inspired work. I want to do stuff I'm passionate about. I want to do this thing where I feel so good. Like it doesn't even feel like work, right?
Right.
But as I was walking around, I'm like, wow, I think sometimes the most inspired work we can do is to keep showing up and doing the work, even when we feel completely uninspired. And so we're not chasing inspiration. We're doing the work. And then we know the inspiration is going to follow. It's going to be there. Like we're going to get into it and it's going to be fruitful. And so I tried to take that metaphor with me as I rescued my grandpa's truck. And I did get the truck, by the way. I was able to get it, fixed it up, drove it back to Colorado on all these like side highways, not knowing if I was going to make it home or not. And I have the truck now in my front yard and the street in my front. And I've used it a ton to pick up a lot of stuff. But it's always that memory. And I remember driving home from this trip, and I'll wrap up the story here because I've talked too long about Kansas and this truck. But I remember driving home, and I remember being with my grandpa right when I was a kid, and he would do the little wave to farmers as they would pass each other. It was like they were all in a club together, like they all knew what it was like to work really hard. And so they had this common connection. And I remember driving home in the truck for the first time when I was driving it home. And these old time farmers were giving me the little, the finger wave, just kind of doing the wave. And it felt like I was a part of the club now. Yeah. And I had to own up to it, and I had to work really hard to make sure that I was worthy of the truck and being led in the club. So that became a metaphor for me. So I think if we bridge those things together from, because different generations has different positive attributes.
Right.
And that's the power of it is pulling that together and even learning from each other in that process too.
For sure. I agree with you on that. I was actually talking to a buddy a week ago or so, and every morning when I run into this older gentleman at the gym, he's probably in his 70s. Every time he comes in and says hi to me, we know each other by name, and I kind of got to thinking about that a little bit, and that is something I think that's super important to take from that generation. Mm-hmm. It seems similar to what you're saying, but he came in, he wouldn't just be, scrolling through his phone or reading the paper. He would come in, he'd look me in the eyes, he'd say, "Hey, Trevor," and talk to me about, the Gophers game the other night, and it made me think of, that's how my grandpa was too. Mm-hmm. My grandpa's idea of having a good time was sitting out in his backyard on the patio, listening to the radio and having the Twins game on the radio and just talking about whatever. And sometimes you weren't even talking. Sometimes you were just kind of hanging out.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode with Paul Angone. This is part 1, and part 2 will be coming out next week. I hope you stay tuned and enjoy the rest of your day.